فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, today we'll get started up in where we left off in the book, which is the Durrat al-bayan, and this is written by Dr. Mohamed yousri. And so we left off in our last class some of the special characteristics of asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah. And we talked a little bit about who is asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah so that we can know about some of their special characteristics as well. And this was something that, of course, there's a big, this is also someone who would fall into asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah. We would call them a Sunni. And I talked about how a Sunnah, like this word Sunni, is something that holds a large context, and the large context is anyone who's not Shia. So like this is one way of Sunni. And then there's another way of Sunni, which means a person that is from asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah. They would also be called Sunni, and so this is something that is more specific. And so of course this falls into the category that we were talking about yesterday. And just to go over a little bit, because some of you didn't make it, we talked about, of course, the first of the people that come into asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah, or that are the beginning of it, are the Sahaba themselves. And so like the Sahaba, of course, they're the ones that are the first people of the asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah. And so when we look back to whatever we're going towards, we're always going back to who they are. And we're going back to what they were upon and what they believed and what they were teaching and the way that they were teaching and all of these things. These are the people that we go back to and we look towards, as well as the first two generations. And so we talked about like the best of Muslims are asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah, just like the best of nations, or like the best of religions is is Islam, the nation of, or the nation, or the like the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so just like we are the best of the different nations that came from before, such as like the Jews or the Christians, the asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah is the best of the Muslims, of all of the different sects of Muslims that there are out there, or the types. asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah is the best of them. And of course they have multiple different names. And of course some of the names, such as like a Salaf al-Salih, this is for technically this refers to the actual the righteous predecessors themselves. And someone who would be like associated to their way would be someone who is called like a Salafi, which is like someone who's associated to following that way. And this is something that we would hope that we follow in their pathways. And of course the people that hold the names, and like the people that hold the names with its rights and that what it actually means and entails is different than the person who claims to be something and doesn't necessarily follow their pathway, but rather holds on to a name. And this is something we see with a lot of people. They'll say, oh, I'm Salafi, which they are claiming to hold on to the way of the Salaf, but when it comes to their akhlaq and like the way that they deal with other people, like their manners and their like characteristics, they hold nothing that is close to their way. And like and what all they hold is just like a name. And this of course isn't everyone, but it is something that has become like particular in this day and age, which a lot of people will shy away from this word Salafi or Salaf, which of course the Salaf themselves, of course there's no one that has like a difference of opinion from asSunnah, or even from like the other like closer branches, and that the Salaf were the best of people. And of course this comes in the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, khairu qarni, or like the best of people is my nation, or like my generation, thumma alladhina yalunahum, and then the people that come after them, thumma alladhina yalunahum, and then the people that come after them. And so these are like the best of people, and of course their way is the best of ways, and it is the wisest of ways, as well as it is the safest of ways to follow in their footsteps. And so we talked about some of these names, such as like as-Salaf al-Salih, and these are the names, of course, for these people that we aspire to follow and what we come after. And then like in a bigger sense, ahlul ittiba', which is like the people that follow. They're like the ones that follow the Quran, the Sunnah, and they follow the Prophet ﷺ, or ahlul athar, which would also someone who is ascribed to athar would be someone who's called athari. which is this person, they hold on to the Sunnah, and they hold on to the different they hold on to the beliefs of like the righteous predecessors that came with certain things. Of course, the Sunnah encompasses all of that. We need to know in a general sense. And then there's some things that came up, such as like when certain bid'ah would come up from one person to another, one group to another group, then we wouldn't necessarily find something specific in the Quran and the Sunnah that would go to this. So what we go to the next thing after that is we look at what did the righteous predecessors, how did they view this thing? Because of course they're the closest to the wahi. Like, so if we have a sahabi who has something to say about this issue that we don't find in the Quran, the Sunnah, then he's the next best person that we look towards, and his view on this is without a doubt is going to be closer to the truth than anyone that comes after him. And so then we do the same thing with these first generations, and we look back to the people that came before and see what they had to say about this. And this is how we look back at some of these issues that come up that maybe we don't have a verse that says in the Quran, we don't have a verse that says the Quran is not created. But we have like verses that the meaning of them entails this, and like then we would have like the Salaf, they would say certain lines that they would say certain things that were bringing out the meaning of the Quran and the Sunnah, and like that the Quran and the Sunnah maybe hold within like the meaning is held within them. But the Salaf would say certain things to explain where does al-Sunnah wal-jamaa'ah, where do they stand in this matter clearly, in response to the bid'ah that would come up. And so of course someone who holds to this athar, which is like bigger than hadith. So you have hadith, which is like for the Prophet ﷺ, and then you have athar, which is for like someone such as like a sahabi, something that the sahabi said that we have a chain or a narration to, then this would be considered athar. Or someone that a tabi'i, he says something, such as Hasan al-Basri, if he said something, this would be like an athar. We wouldn't call it a hadith, but rather we would say it's an athar. And so then the next thing, we have some of these names that are mentioned, which is of Salaf al-Salih, as well as Ahlul Ittiba' or Ahlul Athar, or like Athari, and Ahlul Hadith, and the people that hold on to the Hadith. Because of course this is where the first of bid'ahs came, was when people let go of the Hadith and didn't put what the Prophet ﷺ said first and foremost when it comes to their rulings and understandings. And then after that we would have like a khabar, which is like another name for like athar. They're very similar, which is hadith and khabar, they all have a very similar meaning. And then they're also the firqatun najihah, which is the saved sect, which comes in the hadith, that these are the ones that are upon what the Prophet ﷺ was upon and his companions. And also the victorious group, at-ta'ifatul mansura, which is the victorious group that Allah will assist them until the end of time. And this comes inshallah we'll talk about this when we start up here. But that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "La tazalu ta'ifatun," that there will always be a ta'ifa, or like a group of people that is standing firm upon the haqq, on the truth, until the last day. And this is something that there will always be one of these that are around, and this is something that Allah will give them victory, regardless of who around them, or whatever comes up around them from fasad, or like from differences of opinion in matters that there should be no differences of opinion in. And these things, that Allah will give them victory, and no one will be able to harm them, and they will be firm upon that. And so that they would be called Ta'ifatul Mansura. And then he says that these names are, like, their names are noble and their attributions are honorable. And then he gives the definition, which was where we stopped with yesterday, is that every person who is pleased with Allah as their Lord, and this is also can be found in the hadith, Raditu billahi rabban, that this person is pleased with Allah as their Lord, wa bi islami dinan, and bi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wasallam nabiyan. And this is the hadith that comes as a part of adhkar, that is for us to say like 3 times in the morning, or after the adhan. And this is the meaning that the author here he brought, was that this person should be pleased with Allah as their Lord, as the one that legislates for them and gives them the rulings that they should be holding to, as well as provides for them, and all of the things that they get is from that. They're pleased with Allah as that. and is with the Prophet ﷺ and Muhammad as a prophet and messenger. Of course, they're not looking to anyone else as a prophet and messenger aside from him, after the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. And they're looking to him for guidance in that, and they're holding to that, and they don't think that there's anything else that the Prophet ﷺ missed in the message, and that he gave the message and called us to everything that was good, and holds to Islam in its totality. Like in a general sense, anything that is from Islam, that he knows that is from Islam, he holds to it and he affirms it, and he does his best within himself to come with what is called from him with this matter. And applies its legislation, and like the Sharia, he applies the Sharia with submission and obedience. So he applies the Sharia in his personal life, as well as he hopes that it is applied with the people around him in his personal circle, as well as in a governmental circle. He wants this to be the way that is applied. And of course, the people that are in a foreign land, of course, in America and whatnot, this is something that is very far from being accomplished. But for his personal desires for himself, he knows that this is the right way, and anything that goes against this is something that is ultimately dalala. It's something that is misguidance, and that Allah has given him the best way, and that he wants for this way to be practice. And so he practices it within himself and within his transactions and within his interactions in his lifetime, and with the people around him. And frees himself from every way of bid'ah. And this is, of course, that he doesn't ascribe himself to any of the different people of bid'ah, or any of these different thoughts or groups in a general sense. Then this person is from al-Sunnah wal-jamaa'ah. So this person, as long as they come with these major things, then this person is from al-Sunnah wal-jamaa'ah. And this also, this covers the majority of the ummah, and those who don't go against the sunnah in any universal matter, like a big matter. Like they don't go under this, such as they put philosophy above the Quran or the Sunnah, like the apparent meaning of the Quran and the Sunnah. They take philosophy to change the majority of the text. And this is something that the Ahlul Kalam, the people that get into Kalam, or ilm al-Kalam, which is it's a version of philosophy that came from Aristotle and whatnot, that was taken by a bunch of the Muslims, where they took this philosophy and they tried to clean it up and use it against the different atheists and people that were the enemies of Islam. But when they fell into this, they fell into some serious issues with that, and they would put this above the Quran and the Sunnah when it came to the level of weight that it holds as an argument and an evidence. And of course, this is a major issue, that someone who puts their view, or their logical reasoning above the Quran and the Sunnah, and then they subject the Quran and the Sunnah to their understanding, in this way, this is a major matter. And also someone who puts the Sahaba down. They say the Sahaba were, such as the Shia, they say the Sahaba are untrustworthy, and most of them are munafiqeen, and these different things. This is someone that has they've gone against the Sunnah in a major matter. And so this is, of course, something that takes someone outside of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And of course, this is something, taking someone outside of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is a serious matter, just as taking someone outside of Islam is a serious matter. So all of this, it needs to be done with care, and it's not for the average, for the layman to do. This is for someone who is a scholar to see and look at this, and to see if this person fits into it or not. And in the majority of the people, the majority of the ummah, alhamdulillah, they fall under this banner of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and this is something that is good. And also they are, and then they don't come under, of course I said they don't come under the flag or the name of any type of bid'ah. So the people that live inside of a Shia society, these people that live inside the Shia society, we can't call them Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah if they are following what they do and they don't make any distinction between them and them. This is something that, of course, this person, if they're inside of them, we can't say that this person is from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah just because they're Muslim. They would have to separate themselves in the way that they believe and whatnot from these people for them to be, they need to free themselves from those people, even if they live in that land, and maybe they're giving dawah and whatnot. But they need to separate themselves from that to make themselves different from the majority of the people around them. And if they are in the, like, they increase the population of one of these misguided groups, such as like the Shia, we don't call them from al-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah except with them making it clear where they stand, in accordance to the beliefs of al-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah. And so this is where we left off in the last class yesterday. And then, and I mentioned some of these. Things that came up, and also some of the people where they go overboard in this, and they try to take people outside of al-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah, or they try to say that someone who makes a mistake in some issues is not from al-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah, and they tell it, and basically taking someone outside of al-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah is like calling them a mubtadi', or a person of innovation. And of course, this is a serious matter to call someone a person of innovation, because this needs evidence, and it needs to be done by someone who's knowledgeable. This is not for every Joe Blow to go out and say this person's a mubtadi' because I saw him using beads to count, or that or some, like, a minor issue that he makes mistakes in some way. Maybe he does a bid'ah, or maybe he doesn't do a bid'ah, but it's something that some people say it's a bid'ah and some people don't, and so this person does it. Is this person outside of al-Sunnah? Of course not. This is something that they would need to go against al-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah, and a major issue that, like, it can't be, like, there's no difference of opinion with it. And of course, some of these differences of opinion, there are differences of opinion in Aqeedah, and while these aren't like when we look back at the Salaf and we look back at their difference of opinion, it was always in something that was minor. It wasn't something in a major aspect, but rather as something that was minor. And anyone who picks any of these views inside of them is something that this is something that's permissible. It's permissible for them. Of course, they should always be following what they view as the truth, and what holds the most evidence that after it has come to them. But in general, this person, they're left alone if they're holding on to some views of the Salaf that are strong views. Then this is something that we don't whenever say that this person is a person of misguidance and whatnot from that, because they hold to certain views of the Salaf in that. And so this, so he says it's here, covers the majority of the Ummah, those who don't go against the Sunnah in any universal matter, and don't come under the flag of any type of bid'ah, and don't increase the population of a misguided group. And the next thing that he says here, as we're talking about the characteristics of Ahl Sunnah, he says here, وَهُمْ وَسَطٌ بَيْنَ فِرَقِ الْأُمَّةِ جَمِيعًا. And so he says here that they are in the middle between all of the different sects of the Ummah. And so this is something we'll find with the Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaa'ah when it comes to every single issue that some of the different sects they differed upon. You'll find that Ahl Sunnah is in the middle of these sects. So you have some. So when it comes to the attributes, sifat, for Allah and these attributes, Ahl Sunnah is in the middle, where they don't affirm anything that isn't affirmed from the Quran and the Sunnah. And they also we don't liken Allah to His creation in any way, shape, or form. And then in the second way, you'll also find that they don't also, Ahl Sunnah, they won't say that Allah doesn't have the things that Allah said He has, such as hearing, sight, such as hands in the way that befits Allah, and a face in the way that befits Allah. We don't go into the details of any of these things, but Allah said He has it, and His Messenger said this, so we affirm it, and we don't disbelieve in these things that Allah and His Messenger, which of course they explained it in the best of ways, they said that this is what Allah has. So you'll find that we don't go into one extreme on this side, and we don't go into extreme on this side, which you have the Jahmiyyah, where they wouldn't affirm any of the attributes of Allah, because they thought that this would be likening Allah to His creation just by affirming attributes. And also the Ash'aris, they don't affirm hikmah for Allah, which is wisdom, because they say if Allah did something for a certain thing, then that means that Allah was doing, then there was a reason that Allah did something, and that reason was something that affected Allah in His decision making. Which of course, wisdom is something that we don't need to go into details of that way, and we know that Allah is Hakim. This is what Allah says, and so we take it and we don't try to turn it and twist it into some other way, but rather we affirm this. And the same thing with rahmah, that Allah has mercy. And this mercy is not like the mercy of the creation, but rather this is a mercy that is befitting for Allah. And it's not a weakness that some of the people that deny rahmah, then they say rather it's just that Allah wants good for somebody. No, like rahmah is something that is understood, and we don't need to give it a technical definition and then say that Allah doesn't fit the technical definition that we gave, and then we say that Allah doesn't have it. This is the problem that a lot of the Ash'aris they fall into, is they'll give one of these terms a technical definition that many times maybe it fits, like this technical definition, maybe it fits if you were to say it with a person, and maybe it doesn't fit, but then they will say that this is what rahmah means. It's like a riq al-qalb, that it's like when the heart it feels like weakness towards something, and that it moves towards something. And of course this is not something that we say about Allah, and so then they say, because this is not something we say about Allah, then we say that Allah doesn't have rahmah. And I say, no, your definition of rahmah was incorrect. And so you'll find that al-Sunnah wal-jamaa'ah is in the middle. We affirm what Allah said about Himself, and we don't go into any lengths about affirming something other than what Allah said for Himself. And as opposed to saying that Allah is like flesh and blood or in these things, as there were as some people, like although there were few, there's some people that went into that that kind of tashbih of likening Allah to the creation, which of course this is something that's a type of kufr. And we seek Allah's refuge from that. And then the next thing that the author here says is وَلَا يَخْتَصُّ بِهِمْ مَكَانٌ وَلَا يَخْلُو عَنْهُمْ زَمَانٌ. And so here he says that they are not specified by a place, and they are found in every time. And so this is something, of course, the hadith I mentioned before, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that لَا تَزَالُ طَائِفَةٌ قَائِمٌ عَلَى الْحَقِّ وَيُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ حَتَّى تَقُومَ السَّاعَةُ, أو كما قال. And so like that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that there will be a group, when she's talking about this al-Sunnah wal-jamaa'ah, there will be a group that stands firm upon the truth, fighting in the way of Allah with jihad, and until the coming of the day of until the coming of the Sa'ah, like the hour. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ, he said there will always be this. And of course we found this within every single time. You'll never find that there isn't al-Sunnah wal-jamaa'ah in some place holding on to the haqq, onto the truth. This is something that we find always. There's always a group of the Ahl Sunnah that's holding onto the truth, even if and sometimes there was big insurgences or like there was a lot of misguidance that would come up, whether it was like from the Shia or whether it was from like the Sufis that went overboard and fell away from the Sunnah. And some like the Ash'aris that took over a lot of the madaris and like some of the places of ilm and like teaching and whatnot. They took it over, but at the same time you will always find that there was pockets within all these times where there are people from Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaa'ah holding on to the Aqeedah of the Salaf and holding on to this, and there will never be a time that goes away from that. And this isn't something that is specific to a certain place. We don't say that Medina is the place of the Sunnah and all the other places are not like that. Or we don't say that like only Saudi Arabia holds to it, or only Egypt holds to it, or only Maghrib, Morocco holds to the Quran and the Sunnah. But rather we say that this is something anybody who has these characteristics, they are a part of this Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaa'ah, and it's not something that is specified by an actual place that someone is in. And of course, there's a hadith that comes up that the Prophet ﷺ, he talks about that the ummah, or like the mu'min, the mu'minun, they'll return to Medina, is the meaning of the hadith, that they'll return to Medina and towards the end of time, and they will be like some people that are small. And of course this is something that's specific towards the end of time, and it's not something that is of course, like we're not in the end of time, although there have been certain like signs that have come that are minor signs. None of the major signs have come yet that are for the Sa'ah, but this is of them, that people will return to like the mu'minun, like the believers. They'll return to the two masjids, like the Masjid al-Haram and Masjid al-Madinah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And this is the only time you would say that this is something that the place has that like preference or eminence to that. And so then the next thing that he says here is that لا يخرجون في عقيدتهم عما كان عليه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم والصحابة رضي الله عنهم. And so he says here that these people, they don't go outside the belief of the Prophet, the Aqeedah of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, رضي الله عنهم. And so when we look at this group of asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah, we don't go outside of what the Prophet ﷺ gave us. We know that when the Prophet ﷺ came to us, that he gave us the message, and that the day of Arafah, when he was making Hajj, the Prophet ﷺ, he gave like the famous khutbah, and he had the people bear witness that he gave the message of Islam, what it entailed. And so we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us all the things that we needed, and he pointed up into the sky and said, Allahumma shahad. And then he says that for Allah to bear witness that I gave the message, and that the people around him had borne witness, the Sahaba around him, that he gave the message to them, and that he taught them how to accomplish this deen. And also this is the day that that Allah has sent down al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. And so that that this day Allah has completed the religion. وَأَتْمَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَتِي, that He has completed His favor, which is that the religion of Islam. وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا, and that Allah is pleased with Islam as our religion. And so this is something that from this time we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us all that we need to know, all the tools we need to know for Aqeedah. They come from the Prophet and come from that status of Nubuwwah, as well as the understanding that the Sahaba held. Like, this is something we don't go outside of this. So if the Sahaba, if they ever agreed on something about the Quran, the Sunnah, or an understanding of the Quran, the Sunnah, then it's not for us to ever go outside of what they had to say about this issue. Of course, if this is something, say such in tafsir, sometimes you have tafsir that comes out, and we have like certain sayings from the Sahaba that will come, and they'll say this and say this or say this, and they'll have different meanings. Maybe they seem to be different in what they say. And of course there's reasons in this, and this is something that you look into like in a tafsir class. But we don't go outside of what they had to say about this. So we don't go outside, such as we don't say anything that is opposing to what they in general had to say. And if they disagreed in a certain matter between a couple of views, so they had one view that this was like, such as like we have like niqab. If you say that this is something that is permissible, or if you say that this is something that is wajib, like obligatory, or you say that this is something that is mustahab, these are what we have from the forerunners, that they hold like one of these two positions. So if somebody comes later and says that it's something that is just like it's something that's aida, or that's something that is outside of, it's not obligatory for someone to do, and it's not actually asked of them in the first place. This is something that's just permissible for them to do, and this is something that goes against what the forerunners had to say about this. And there's the same things when it comes to the many of the issues that come up from the people of bid'ah. They will go outside. They'll take what the Sahaba said, and they will leave its meaning that they came with, and they'll go outside of this. And this is something that you won't find asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah go outside of what the Sahaba had to say about a matter. Or of course the Prophet ﷺ. If the Prophet ﷺ had, if he said something about a certain matter, then of course there's no one else that after that has a say that's likening to this. And of course the Sahaba themselves, there's hadith that some of the Sahabas, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith that لا يمنعن أحدكم imra'atahu lis-salah, or in the meaning of it, which is that no one should ever stop any of their wives from going out to pray salah in the masjid. And so and this is something that comes in hadith that are sahih. And one of the Sahabas, because he saw like that there was fitna and whatnot around him, with his ijtihad, he said that this was something that he says, "Wallahi la yamna'annahun." And so he says that he's like, I'm going to, and he like swears by Allah that he's gonna stop them from going out. And of course, this is his ijtihad. He thinks that there's a reason for this. But the other Sahabi punched him in the chest and hit him, and he said, what are you going to say in direct opposition to the Prophet ﷺ? It's like there's no matter of discussion here. Like, and of course, like the meaning of what the other Sahabi is something that, of course, if there's a fitna or something of this sort, looking into the meaning, this is good. But the way that the Sahabi in this matter, he went against like the direct saying. He says like the Prophet ﷺ says, La yamna'anna. And then he says, Wallahi la yamna'anna, which is the Prophet ﷺ says, don't prohibit. He says, Wallahi, I'm going to prohibit them from doing it. And so like just that, the basic of the fact that he was going against the direct command, even though he's looking at the meaning of it. And this is something that like the meaning of what he says, there's nothing like wrong with it, but the way that he said it was something that the other Sahabi got very, very upset. And he said there's no room for anyone to have an opinion after the Prophet ﷺ said something. And this is of course the way that the Sahaba, when someone would ever go against what the Prophet ﷺ said, regardless of their status, even if it was the Abu Bakr or Omar. This is the same thing. If someone said someone came up to one of the Sahabis and asked him his opinion on something, and he gave him the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or one of the Salaf, afwan. And then this person said, what do you think about this matter? And he just gave him what the Prophet ﷺ said. And he said, but Abu Bakr and Omar, they said this. And so like he says, this person was scared that Allah was going to send down like something from the sky, like adab from the sky on this person, because he's going against the Prophet ﷺ in this matter. Even if like the other Sahaba said something in this matter, if the Prophet ﷺ said it, then it's the end. Like there's no dispute in this matter. This is a settled matter. And of course, at the time of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, they didn't have like the same means of communication that we have now, such as we have sunnah.com. We can any hadith that we want to find, we can find it on sunnah.com, and there's like applications on the phone that we could find all the hadith, and they're all available to us. And anyone who wants to look at all of the hadith that we have, we can get these and compile them in just like a short amount of books. We can get these hadith and we can look at all of what the Prophet ﷺ had to say about a matter. But this was something at the time of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, they didn't necessarily have the same type of communication. So sometimes they would make ijtihad in a matter that no hadith reached them. Like no hadith reached them in a matter. And so they would make ijtihad, and they would use qiyas, and they would try to come to a ruling in this matter because they didn't know of any text from the Prophet ﷺ that said something about this matter. So they would have a view, and then when the hadith comes, then their view, they throw it out because there's no ijtihad in the light of nas, or like in the light of a text. If there's a text in this matter, then there's no ijtihad that goes against this in any way, shape, or form. And so this is sometimes, if you see any of like some of the differences, if the Sahaba say one thing and whatnot, this is some of the reasons that some of the differences come. But in general, the asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah, we never step outside of the boundaries that they set in something. So we have, so if they ever disagreed in a matter, then we never step outside of it. And someone who is inside of their disagreements, such as like, does touching a woman break wudu or not? This is something that many of the Sahaba said, touching a woman, like touching a woman breaks your wudu. And some of the Sahaba said no. And so like this is a difference of opinion that even like when we see the four madahib, all of these, they have their opinions within them, but they will never step outside of the opinions or the views of the Sahaba. And they will always be inside of this. And you'll always find that the views of the four madhab, in general, they always encompass the views of the Sahaba. And even if they don't like you won't say that Imam Shafi'i always agrees with Ibn Abbas. And you wouldn't say that he always agrees with Ibn Masud. You wouldn't say that Abu Hanifa always agrees with Ibn Masud. But rather, they will agree with some of the Sahaba in regards to how they look at the evidences, and what they, according to like the evidence says that reached them, and the way that they interpret it and viewed it with their ijtihad, they won't step outside of what the Sahaba had to say in this matter. And this is something that is a sign of asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah, is that we make sure that we hold ourselves to whatever the Prophet ﷺ said first and foremost, and then we never step outside the differences of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum. And of course, this is something in Aqeedah that we don't do, and this also goes inside of fiqh, as well as I mentioned, like some of the issues of fiqh. You'll find that these madhabs in general, like the four madhabs, they don't step outside of their views. Maybe in some ways, if there's no evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah that's like blatant or like super apparent, then maybe they will look to what did the Sahaba have to say about it. And if they don't find something from the Sahaba, they'll find something that's like it from the Quran and the Sunnah, and they'll see if they can liken it to it, or they'll see from something that the Sahaba said and see if they can they can liken that to that. And this is something, but they won't step outside of this if there's difference, or if there's views of the Sahaba in this. They stick within the people, the forerunners that came before. And so this is one of the telltale signs and characteristics of the Ahl-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah. And the next thing that the author he says here is hum, and he means like they're Ahlul Inaya bil Quran wa Ahlul Riayati li Sunnati Khairil Anam sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he says that these people, that they are people that give great importance to the Quran, and they study and preserve the Sunnah of the best of the creation, like Khairul Anam, which is one of the names of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or like one of the sifa, like the characteristics that is used to describe him. And this is something that, of course, is a telltale sign of the people of Ahl-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah, is that you'll find that we hold on to the Quran, and that the Ahl-Sunnah of all times, they've always played a major role in their application of the Quran. And it's not something that they just read it so that they have a good tilawah, but rather they apply it in its meanings. They study its meaning. They study the tafsir of the Quran, and they look into the Quran. They study and make sure that they know Arabic, and they study Arabic into its depths, so that they can understand the Quran in the most like suitable fashion. And this is something that the ihtimam, or like the care and importance that the Quran is given in the lives of Ahl-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah is something that is a characteristic of the Ahl-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah. And they put this as a major source of barakah. And Allah says that كتاب أنزلناه مبارك ليدبروا آياته. And so this is something that Allah, He says here, that this is a book that we sent down that is Mubarak. And Mubarak is something that has lots of barakah in it. So that we لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. And so that the people of understanding ponder it. So that the people, they will mull it over, and they'll ponder its meanings. And so that they will take heed and understand from the Quran. Of course, the Quran is not something that is an act of worship for us to just recite it with our lips and then we leave it at that. No, we should always be looking towards the meaning of the Quran and understanding not just the meaning of it, but what is the result of learning the meaning, is that our body and our actions will follow according to this meaning and will apply it in our lives. And this is something that is very, very important. And that you will never find someone who puts their time into the Quran, you'll never find that their time that they put into the Quran is wasted. And this is something many of the scholars, they talk about, what is their greatest regret towards the end of their life. And a lot of the scholars, they'll say, my greatest regret was that I didn't spend more time studying the Quran. And this is something that the person who that puts his life and puts his time and energy into studying the Quran, he will find that there's barakah in his time, there's barakah in what he does in his life, and that Allah will give him barakah. And even within myself, when I study and I see that I give that great importance to the Quran, and I make sure that I don't leave it off in muraja and reviewing it and whatnot, this is something that I find that the rest of my day, it's much, much better. When I've given that importance to the Quran, that I find that barakah comes up in the rest of my day, as opposed to if I sometimes lack off or slack off in some way or another in my revision of the Quran or reading of that, I can see that there's something missing. Where's this thing in that that's missing in my life. And of course, the importance that we give to the Quran is something that also encompasses its meaning. This is something that's very important. So someone who memorizes the Quran and they recite it all the time, but they don't understand what it means, and they're not interested in looking up the tafsir, and they're not interested in learning Arabic, even to the point where they just understand the general meanings of the Quran. This is something that is lacking in this person's like the importance that they're giving to the Quran. They're not actually taking the Quran for its like the meaning that Allah has sent it down is liyadabbaru ayatihi. Like the reason is that they would ponder the ayat of Allah in the Quran. This is the meaning. So every single Muslim should do what they can, what's in their power, to study the Quran and to study the meanings of the Quran and learn Arabic, learn like Nahu, and learn some of these different things that will help them understand the Quran. And I can't, like for myself, I could never put a price tag or like a value. I could never put like amount of money on the value of knowing Arabic. Like this is something, of course, it took a little bit of time, but within a year, someone can learn enough Arabic to where they get their feet, like if they put their mind and their effort into it, if they put a year into learning Arabic where they were going at it every single day and they were pushing hard and they were studying it, they can have enough Arabic to get them started to where they can learn from Arabic books and learn from Arabic literature or Arabic lectures and whatnot that would get them to go to the rest of understanding the Quran. And this is something, there's no price tag on this. Like, if you can go to the actual scholars, then you have no need of me. And this is actually my goal. Of course, it's like if I could teach you Arabic and just and send you to the scholars right away, this is something that, of course, without a doubt, I would do. And this is the best thing for people, because once someone learns Arabic, they can't fall into the deceptive traps of some of the people that are leading people astray. And some of the major reasons that people lead other people astray in the deen is because these people don't know Arabic. And because if they knew Arabic, they would understand the Quran when it says something in a certain way. They would understand it very clearly. And all they would have to do is they would hear the Quran and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's what's right. But the people that have fallen into misguidance many times are very, very, very far. Like they're very, very far from Arabic. And so when these issues come, even though they've been reading the Quran, maybe they read the Quran, they read the Quran through every single month, or maybe a couple times a month, or maybe every couple months. They read the Quran all the way through, but they never actually understood what they were reading, so they didn't actually, the message never reached them. But the person who has an understanding, even if a basic understanding of Arabic, or the basic understanding of tafsir, when they read the Quran, this will affect them in a much greater way, and it will keep them from the misguidance of the people that are calling towards misguidance. They'll see that this is plain misguidance because Allah says this, or this is the hadith that comes and it said, and the Prophet ﷺ said this. And it's very hard to trick somebody that knows Arabic. When it comes to the deen, it's hard for those people to fall astray. And this is one of the things that negatively affected the ummah at the time of the end of the Ottoman Empire, is that the Ottoman Empire was not running their empire off of Arabic. Before then, people were running it off of Arabic, and then they had switched it over to Turkish. And they separated people from Arabic so much that it created a weakness within the Muslim ummah. So where they didn't have that thing that brought them together and brought them together with ilm, with knowledge, of knowing what Allah said and what the Prophet ﷺ, because they're always taking it to a translation. This is something that the translation, no matter how good the translator is, he will always be missing, because nobody can write like the Quran, and the Quran can never be translated into another language, because there's no equivalent to what Arabic, like the words in Arabic and the way that it's put together in Arabic and the meanings that come in Arabic. There's no equivalent in any other language to do this. And of course, like before learning Arabic, I had thoughts that maybe I can do a great, amazing translation of the Quran. Like I used to write poetry and whatnot, and I used to think myself to be some type of writer. And then when I come to the Quran after learning Arabic, I'm like, I can't. There's no way I can put in this line. I can't put the meaning that's in the Quran in this and like 2 lines. I can't put it in a paragraph. Like the meaning that comes in just a single line in the Quran that we would read in the Mus'haf. I can't put this meaning in a paragraph. And of course, like this is some of the miraculous nature of the Quran, is that it holds all of this meaning. And someone who learns Arabic, they can understand this, and they can taste the beauty and the miraculous nature of the Quran. That someone who doesn't know Arabic, they can hear about it. And like there's nothing like experiencing the Quran in Arabic. And so I encourage all of you to learn, to do what you can to learn Arabic. And as I mentioned before, I think in some of the chats, but there's an app that one of the brothers, Adam Jabel, I think he's up in Bellevue, but he put together an app which is called Quranic, which is an app that's on iPhone. I think it might also be on the Android systems, but it's called Quranic. And this is an app that helps people learn the actual words that are in the Quran. And someone who goes through this app, after a short period of time, they will have memorized the like 80% of the vocabulary of the Quran. And this is easy for someone to do in a short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 months if they plug away. And the app is like something that someone takes 5 minutes, 3 minutes, and they can practice their memorizing and learning of new words of the Quran. And this is something that you can learn the majority of the Quran, like the words of the Quran, in a small period of time. Like 80% of the work you can do in a very short period of time. And this is something I encourage all of you, if you get this app or you find something that is similar to this, because of course like these words that come over and over again in the Quran, that are like the most popular words in the Quran, these are something that a new Muslim or like someone who knows how to read Arabic but they don't understand it yet, this is something that they can memorize and in a very short period of time, and they can understand the gist of what the Quran is saying just by hearing it, and this doesn't take a lot of time for someone to get into. Of course, learning the grammar and all of this, and like learning grammar and sarf and these other things, these take of course like a specific effort and whatnot. But to learn just like the vocabulary, this is something that can be done in a very short period of time. And this is also one of the biggest things like that someone has to overcome when coming into learning Arabic, is learning the vocabulary. And also, so I spent a little bit of time going into Arabic because this is the thing that gets us that we want to look into the Quran and take that appreciation and time and effort in learning what the Quran has to say. It can never be done efficiently except with Arabic. And so, and of course, the other thing is that asSunnah wal-jamaa'ah is also they put a lot of focus into hadith and like studying the hadith, and whether or not they're actually like a muhaddith, like you would say this person is a specialist in hadith, or you say that this person they give their time to read the hadith, whether it's like they read the al-bayan and Nawawi, maybe they memorize it and they understand the meanings in their life, or they read. They should always have, like a person should always have like a consistent routine, as he has a consistent routine inshallah with reading the Quran. He should have a consistent routine with reading the Sunnah. This is something that is very important, that the Muslim is reading the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is something, if you get like a translation of Riyadh al-Salihin, this is one of the best, of course, this is one of the best books that somebody can read on a normal basis and go over these hadith. And most everything in Riyadh al-Salihin, almost every single hadith is sahih in there, and most of it is from Sahih Bukhari or Muslim. And the way that Imam al-Nawawi, he puts together these hadith with the ayats and whatnot, this is something that is really amazing. Like this book of hadith is something that is really beneficial, as well as for someone that doesn't know Arabic yet. There's also translations of, I think it's like the combination between Sahih Muslim and Bukhari and Muslim. They're put together. I think it's Lu'lu' wal-Marjan. There's translations of that are available, and also using Sunnah.com. I think it's Sunnah.com. This is a great way to pull it up on your phone, and you can read through some of these books of hadith. Of course, if you're looking at like a way to get the most bang from your buck in reading these hadith, the best of ways to go about this, of course, starting with hadith al-bayan and Nawawi, like starting with these, and then going after that to reading the hadiths from like Riyadh al-Salihin. This is like the best way to go. Of course, there's Bukhari and Muslim and Tirmidhi and Abu Dawood. But you'll find with, of course, Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, these are books they're very long, and they repeat a lot of things, and they also have the repetitions are like they're for a meaning that they have. Of course, Bukhari has a different method why he repeats his hadiths over and over again, because there'll be like variations in the wordings, and there'll also be variations in the sanad, or like the chain of narrators that he does for a certain reason. And maybe this hadith, there's a benefit here in this particular chapter of fiqh, And then in another chapter of fiqh, there's also a benefit in that same hadith, so he puts it with a different isnad and with a different wording that is closer to the meaning over here, and so I repeat these hadiths. And this is something, of course, for a new person, it's better for them to read something that is more concise, that doesn't necessarily have the chain of narrators and whatnot to busy this person, but they can just read something such as Riyadh al-Salihin and have a constant repetition where on a daily basis, or if not on a daily basis, then at least they have a certain thing that they're reading multiple times a week. They're reading the Sunnah and having this. And this, of course, for a student of knowledge is even more important. Especially when they can read Arabic. There's books, of course, that have put together all of the Sunnah in like three different volumes, where you have the whole authentic Sunnah in like 3 different volumes. And this is something that is important for like a student of knowledge, of course, to always be giving that time and importance to learning what the Prophet ﷺ said in his life and how he acted in his character and what he said in these in all of the different areas, and how do we apply this, of course, which is the biggest thing. And you'll find that this is also one of the reasons that you see al-Sunnah wal-jamaa'ah is also called Ahlul Hadith. Like that's one of the other terms that they're given, because they're the people of Hadith, the people that hold on to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and they give it that great importance. And then the next thing that the author here gives is he says, وَهُمْ أَهْلُ الْإِجْتِمَاعِ عَلَى الِاتِّبَاعِ النَّابِذُونَ لِلْفِرْقَةِ وَالْإِبْتِدَاعِ. And so he says that these are the people that come together. These are the people that of coming together in following the truth. Now, of course, that coming together, it is linked with following the truth, what the Prophet ﷺ came for. And then they're also, they throw aside division and innovation. And so this is something that's very important. That al-Sunnah wal-Jamaa'ah, we come together and we don't break people apart. And when we come together, we don't come together on something that is clearly misguidance. And of course, there's issues that are differences of opinion, such as someone who wipes on their socks, or someone says, you need to have like a thick version. It needs to actually be like it actually needs to be something that is thick. Like the Shafis, they have to view where it needs to be something that is thick. Like you would say, like a boot would be like the only thing that actually falls into the conditions in this day and age of wiping on the khuf. And so like there's certain things like you have this difference of opinion, but this difference of opinion isn't something that that we look at and we say this person is on they're wrong and we're right, and then we're going to make a big division about this. The differences of opinion like this is something we come together and we accept that there's these differences of opinion, but they're not in the major matter. And so we take into consideration of that. But when it comes to like a difference of opinion of someone that says that the Quran is not the word of Allah, or like that Allah didn't speak the Quran as it is with its wordings and with all of like that every single harf, and it's in the way that it comes together. This is something that Allah actually spoke. If somebody denies that Allah spoke the Quran and that this is not the word of Allah, but rather this is something that is the word of some of the creation, of course this is a matter we will never come together upon this. This is something that is batil, and so we don't come together on this, but rather we come together on what is true and what is something that has the possibility of being true, such as in the differences of opinion. We don't let these differences of opinion that are minor break us apart. This is something that like this person's a Shafi, this person's a Hanafi, this person puts his hands here, this person puts his hands here, this person says Bismillah when he makes wudu, this person says it's obligatory, or this person says it's not obligatory. Like this is not a matter that we make a big difference of opinion about. Or like that we make a big matter where we break apart people, but rather we come together on this. And this is something that when there was a dark time in the Ummah, where some of the people, they let these matters of fiqh, these differences of opinion when it comes to matters of fiqh and legislation, they let these matters come between them until there was a time where the Kaaba, around the Kaaba, there was a time when the Malikis would make their salah, and then the Shafis would make their salah, and then the Hanafis would make their salah, and then the Hanbalis would make their salah, all different from each other. And this was something that they let their ta'assub, like this heavy holding to their madhabs, break them apart, because they said my madhab is correct, and if this person doesn't do it according to the way that my madhab was, then this is something that they're correct and my salah is not sahih. and not sahiha behind them. Like my salah is no good behind a person that doesn't make wudu properly according to my madhab. And like this is something that that broke apart the ummah in this way. And this is something, alhamdulillah, the ummah came back together and they prayed together in regards to these things, and they didn't let this break them apart. And this was a time that came out when people held to their madhabs like blindly, and they weren't looking at the evidences and whatnot, and they let the holding to their madhabs, which ultimately, like following a madhab, there's nothing wrong with this, but letting it be a source of division in the ummah, this is where it comes into something that is an issue. When somebody says they start to love and hate depending on their madhab, and this is of course this is a serious issue. Because this person, the love that a person should have for their Muslim brother should be according to his iman and his holding to the Prophet ﷺ. If he holds to the Prophet ﷺ, like none of the madhabs are calling people to not hold to the Prophet ﷺ, and all of them are their goal is to follow the Prophet ﷺ. So anyone who holds to it in this way or holds to it in this way, this is something that is like we can understand. It's an understandable difference, and so this should never be something that pulls apart the ummah. And then also the other thing is that that they throw aside this breaking apart and also the innovation. And this is something that when there's innovation that comes, we know that nothing لا يصلح لآخر أمة ما لم يصلح لأولها. And so like this is something that there's nothing that will benefit the end of the people that come at the end of the ummah, like in our day and age, that was no good for the beginning of the ummah. Like this is something we look back, what was good for them is also good for us. We don't try to change this and make this difference. Of course, like if there's a loudspeaker for adhan, this is something, of course, this would have been good for them, and if they had it, they would have used it, you know. But this is something that's not, we wouldn't necessarily say like this is a bid'ah or some of these things like technology. But when it comes to like belief and like the core of our belief and the way that we worship Allah, this is something we look towards them. And if they left off something, the people that are the predecessors of the Salaf, if they left off something, there was a reason they left it off. If they didn't delve into these deep philosophical issues about the attributes of Allah and why it is permissible that Allah is like this or not permissible, without looking to the Sunnah and whatnot, and they dive into these details that the Sahaba didn't delve into, this is something we know they didn't delve into it, and they had a reason for them not to delve into it, because of their taqwa and of their respect for Allah. And so this is something that we throw aside, and all of that, any of the bid'ah that comes in, we throw that aside, and we throw aside the differences of the breaking apart the ummah. And this is something, some of the people, they will say that, you know, someone saying the truth, saying the haqq, the person that says the truth is breaking apart the ummah. And in reality, they're not breaking apart the ummah. The ummah was already broken apart, and the person who says the truth, he just makes aware that the ummah has broken apart. You know, like the person who calls towards the Quran and the Sunnah and calls towards the correct belief of this, and that calls people to doing what's right, he's not the one who's breaking apart the ummah. The person who breaks apart the ummah is the one who walks away from what is right. That's the person who breaks apart the ummah. And this is something that a lot of people, they'll say, no, don't talk about these areas of difference when there's like serious issues in some of the things that people do, whether it's the liberalization of people, or people that go against the Quran and the Sunnah in certain ways, and they don't want to talk about it because they don't want breaking apart of people. That breaking apart of people is already done within the actual, the reality of the situation is they're already broken apart in their belief. But the person who shows the truth, he's not the person that breaks people apart. It's the people that resist the truth, and they deny it, and they go in their other way from this. This is the person that is now creating the division. And this is, of course, a shubha that sometimes comes up, where people will say, you guys, you know, that are making a big fuss about this stuff, you know, like you're breaking apart the ummah. And of course, this is looking back about what are we making, what is somebody making that inkar, or like that is calling out against something? Is this something that needs to be called out about? Or is it something that doesn't need to be called out about? And of course, this takes fiqh. But for the person who is calling against what is clearly munkar, and this person, when he does it in the proper way, he's not a person that's creating division. The person who creates division is a person that holds to that munkar, and that refuses to come to the haqq. And wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Inshallah, we'll call it for today at this point. and we'll pick up where we left off in the next class. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.